Hello mate, my name's Gareth and welcome to Wrestling. Today we're looking at 10 wrestlers AEW could sign in 2022 or what remains of 2021. There are so many wrestlers available, or soon to be available, so I won't be able to cover every possibility in this video. There will be some that I miss, but these are the 10 wrestlers that I would personally prioritise. Equally, AEW have a stacked roster and they don't need to sign everyone. I'm not saying they will or even should sign all of these wrestlers, just that these are the ones that would excite me most. I've highlighted 5 women's and 5 men's wrestlers, so without further ado, let's get straight into the list. Paige is one of the most popular wrestlers in WWE history, and that is obvious by her continued success on Twitch despite not wrestling for a few years. She was forced to retire early due to a neck injury, much like Edge, Christian and Bryan Danielson. However, over the last few months she's made some comments which some fans have interpreted as Paige making an unlikely return to the ring. One might think that she would stay on with WWE, given that they kept paying her and found roles for her out of the ring despite her injury. However, Paige has been very outspoken about WWE's crackdown on third-party work, and also about them firing people willy-nilly, including some of her best friends. Maybe she will choose to stick with them, or maybe she'll jump ship when her contract expires in June 2022, which she was more than happy to share on Twitch. She was a key member of WWE's Women's Revolution, so perhaps she fancies making more history in another company that desperately needs another true star in their women's division. AEW's men's division is absolutely stacked, and whilst Kyle O'Reilly is a fantastic singles wrestler, his early work in AEW might come by reforming his legendary tag team with Bobby Fish, Red Dragon. The tag division in AEW has grown a little stale in its booking, despite still easily being the best tag roster in the world. The addition of Red Dragon would shake things up nicely and help bring that division back to the levels it reached during 2020. Beyond reforming Red Dragon though, Kyle O'Reilly coming to AEW might put Adam Cole in an interesting position. There are various storyline possibilities in which you could go, which I'm sure you can fantasy book for yourself. Whichever way they might choose to go, Kyle O'Reilly is a no-brainer signing for Red Dragon alone. Ring of Honor's future is up in the air with a lot of uncertainty, and their talent have been given the option to sign elsewhere. Rok-c is a 20-year-old wrestling prodigy with a high ceiling. She is currently Ring of Honor's Women's Champion, which just goes to show the faith they had in such a young wrestler. She's no rookie though, Rok-c has been wrestling for 7 years. She also recently made it known that AEW approached her before she signed with Ring of Honor, so we know that interest is, or at least was, there, and she's given AEW no reason to lose that interest in her. AEW could do with some more women's wrestlers so that they have more options when making different matches and booking feuds. Rok-c would slot in perfectly as a future star, much like Daniel Garcia or Lee Moriarty in the men's division. She doesn't need to be a huge star immediately, but she's someone the audience can grow with over the coming years. I shouldn't need to sell you on the potential of signing Kevin Steen. He's one of those wrestlers where, no matter what the context is, if you have the chance to sign him, you sign him. He's over massively with hardcore wrestling fans, and also the more casual wrestling fan also. He can play babyface or heel and is exceptional at both. He has history with so many on the AEW roster that could be explored in stories moving forward, but equally there's plenty of new matchups and new ground for Kevin to tread in AEW also. I probably don't need to convince you that this is a good idea, and even if I do, it doesn't really matter because it's almost certainly going to happen when his contract expires in January 2022. However, I'll leave you with this one thing that I haven't really seen many people talking about yet. A Kevin Steen vs Eddie Kingston feud. Just one of many possibilities what makes Kevin Steen to AEW so exciting for me. We've spoken about AEW needing a new star in the women's division and about AEW adding a women's prodigy, but what AEW need more than anything in the women's division are competent wrestlers who might not be champion immediately, but can put on good matches and provide the division with some more legitimacy. Too many of AEW's women are young and green. This is generally fine when they face the more experienced members of the roster, but they are in short supply at the moment. Tegan Nox will come in and be capable of having good matches whilst putting over the top talent and helping the younger talent. In herself, she has the potential to be a major player in the division if all goes well, but even as a worst case scenario, she would be an exceptional hand, and those wrestlers are extremely valuable to any roster. Shane Strickland came into NXT with a huge reputation, particularly earned in MLW and Lucha Underground. It's fair to say that his NXT run slightly underwhelmed on initial expectations, but it's also true that it wasn't really all his fault. Initially he struggled to connect as a character, but had great matches, and then he found a character that worked before developing Hit Row, which, despite the Twitter antics of certain members, started to get over as heels. But just as he was getting into his groove as North American champion, NXT changed and Hit Row were moved onto the main roster and then released before they were ever given a shot. Untapped potential is the best way to describe his time in WWE. My favourite thing about Strickland to AEW is that he would bring a form of charisma that we don't really see on the roster at present. Whilst he may struggle in the stacked roster to get as many opportunities as he would in Impact or MLW, I do think he would stand out in AEW in a way that few others do. Building a faction around Strickland would be awesome, and at just 31 years old, he has the time to grow into a legitimate star.
Today they ask us to get rid of Joe, tomorrow they ask me to get rid of you. Is that okay with you? Because it's not okay with me.
Ember Moon is a signing who would fill a similar role to Tegan Nox as I spoke about before, but she likely has a slightly higher ceiling in AEW as she just seems a rung above the likes of Nox. The one issue I and many others had with her in NXT was her character work. This will hold her back in AEW if she's not able to connect with the audience, because it is a company of characters. But I've had that worry about other ex-WWE wrestlers who have joined AEW in the past. Sooner or later, AEW finds the right way to present the wrestler, so I have faith that it would all work out in the end and she would be a great addition to the women's roster. Jonathan Gresham is legitimately one of the best wrestlers in the world, and what could be Ring of Honor's loss should absolutely be AEW's gain. If you end up signing Jay Lethal but not Gresham, something has gone seriously wrong. Dream match with Bryan Danielson aside, imagine what Gresham could do as a mentor for a guy like Lee Moriarty. He'd be a shoo-in to be TNT champion one day, potentially even world champion depending on how well he connects with the audience. He is only 33 years old after all. He'll likely be Ring of Honor world champion soon, so he could even defend that title on AEW TV like Serena Deeb did with the NWA title. Relations between the companies are up in the air, so it might not be that realistic, but I imagine AEW would like to pay homage in some way to Ring of Honor, the company that effectively birthed AEW. Either way, Gresham is a very ambitious guy who sees wrestling in a way that most just don't. Having his mind in your company makes it even richer in a similar way to having Kenny Omega does. Gresham isn't just a good option, he's an essential if it is at all possible to sign him. Trish ADORA is another wrestler who is available after Ring of Honor's situation. I wrote an article about 10 women AEW should sign a year ago, and she was my number 2 on that list, and here she is again. I'm a huge fan of hers. She is certainly not the finished article, but she is a rising star in women's wrestling, and would be a fantastic addition to AEW. She has the charisma to develop a character, which is an increasing issue in AEW's women's division. She is also a big student of wrestling, with Jonathan Gresham as her inspiration, so there's only room for her to grow. As a former rugby player and member of the US Army, it's unsurprising that she has explosive power, and this is what really draws my eye to her during her matches. Her finisher, the Lariat Tubman, is one of my favourites in all of wrestling. The reason she's so high on this list is because she's someone that I've personally wanted in AEW for a long time. I have a lot of faith in her, but if you're not aware of her, know that it isn't just me who thinks of her this way. She's already appeared on AEW Dark Elevation, so hopefully that's a sign of things to come. It's worth saying with Keith Lee that I didn't love his run in WWE that much. His matches always banged, but they just didn't know how to present him properly, to me at least. Even in NXT, he was given these weirdly scripted promos, which always just baffled me. When you listen to him speak in his own words, he's such an eloquent and poetic speaker. He's one of the most charismatic guys in wrestling, so I just can't fathom why WWE fed him scripted promos, but that is what they do after all. Despite this, he was still massively over and adored by most of the audience, because he somehow made it work. He's physically imposing and a badass, as well as a lovable and vulnerable man. He, much like Hangman Adam Page, is the perfect babyface for this generation. I have no doubts that AEW would nail his presentation, so whilst I personally didn't click with him in WWE, I know that I would love him in AEW. Furthermore, AEW don't have a big guy who is a legitimate star right now. Lance Archer is stuck in the mid-card, Wardlow is building for the future, and Miro is just on the precipice. Even then, Keith Lee's presence and the way he finds the camera to make himself feel even more imposing is unmatched by any of those I named. You could easily argue that Keith Lee is the best big man in wrestling today. Keith Lee is, in my opinion, the one wrestler you absolutely cannot pass up on. So, those are my top 10 wrestlers AEW could sign in 2022. There's an article over on Pro Wrestling Musings to which I contributed, which goes into more depth about other wrestlers AEW could sign in the coming months. I really recommend it, and I'll leave a link in the description if you want to check it out. Who do you want AEW to sign? Does anyone on my list stand out, or would you prioritise others? Let me know in the comments below, and make sure to leave a like on the video if you enjoyed, it really helps me out, and subscribe for more AEW related content. Cheers mate!